You are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the Unholy Trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, at the 420 studio down by the lagoon, and I am fortunate to be joined. We're bi-coastal today, New York, by author and very famous New York Yankee historian, Mr. Marty Appel. How are you, Marty? Sorry I messed up your name, but
no, that's okay. Nice to be with you.
It's nice to be having you. I have admired you from afar for many, many years, back when you were an executive with the fledgling New York Sets/Apples. They were a tennis franchise back in the 70s, and it was team tennis, and my father's first cousin owned the team, Saul Berg. And I come to find out you were an executive with them. And so before we get into baseball, you want to reminisce about those days just a little bit?
Yeah, it was just one summer out of my life before the league went out of business, although it was reformed some years later under Billie Jean King's guidance. She was on the team, and she was, what a dynamo. It was exciting, almost as exciting as being, with Mickey Mantle in my Yankee days. She was great, but I had a special relationship with the late Vitas Gerulaitis, who, despite his kind of odd name where people thought he was a foreigner, he was such a New Yorker with a New York accent, and he had a swagger about him, and he took me into the hot discos of the time, Studio 54 and Regine's. Everybody loved Vitas, and he was a huge Yankee fan, so he liked to talk baseball with me. Those are my best memories of the Apples.
Yeah, Vitas, like another one of your real people, Thurman Munson with the Yankees, died much too early. You wrote a book about Thurman, and I think their stories are somewhat similar. They just burned out in a way that was so crazy. Vitas died a bad heater, if I remember. Emitted carbon monoxide. And,
in fact, most homes now have carbon monoxide detectors in them, and that actually goes back to Vitas's death. That's when people got a little spooked about, oh my God, that could happen. And so that was something good that came of that tragedy.
So, Marty, you grew up in New York, and in Brooklyn. Where did you go to high school in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I went to high school actually in Rockland County in the northern suburbs of New York, Spring Valley High School.
Okay. Anybody play ball there that you remember that you followed coming out?
Yeah, but none of them made it to much higher than Class A in the minors, so, there's no names that come from there that people would connect with. A couple of NFL players came out of there, but Jim Ridlon of the Dallas Cowboys was the best known. But basically it was a great sports conference in Rockland County, and in 1965 and 66, Spring Valley and Nyack played against each other in the final game of the football season. And with all the World Series and Super Bowls I've been to, those two competitions remain as exciting a day as I've ever had in sports, one year after the next.
Wow. Very cool. That sticks with you. When did you think, boy, I like to cover sports, I'd like to write about it, I'd like to be part of it? When did that hit you, in high school?
Junior high school, I became sports editor of my junior high school newspaper. And I just always had that. Through junior high school, I was sports editor. College, I went to State University in Oneonta, which is near Cooperstown, and I was sports editor as a freshman, and then I became editor-in-chief in my sophomore year. So it was always in my blood.
You mentioned Cooperstown. We just had an induction ceremony. Anybody stand out from those 4 or 5? I guess we got to talk Joe Torre. Joe, who I remember, was a manager of St. Louis, did not do well. Manager of the Mets, did not do well. Came to the Yankees, and for some reason, and he was really one of my heroes. He's a Brooklyn kid growing up, took over Fidel Crandall in 1961. Joe's the man. Any memories of Joe that maybe explain why he was so special?
It's a very good question, and he was a lot like Casey Stengel when he came to the Yankees. Casey Stengel was a reputation of being a failure in the National League as a manager and kind of ridiculed coming to New York and managed the great Yankees. Torre had much the same impact when he arrived. It was Clueless Joe was the headline in the newspaper.
Clueless Joe, that was, yes. I remember that.
But my gosh, he winds up, with all these championships. And when you compare him today to Stengel, to Joe McCarthy, to Miller Huggins, Joe won all these pennants where he had to beat 13 opponents, not 7. He had to win 3 rounds in the postseason, not 1. He had a very demanding and short-tempered boss who was, one losing season and you're gone. He
Quite
had,
understated.
He had players who were on long-term contracts, and they spoke foreign languages, and they were multicultural. Stengel, Huggins, McCarthy, they never had any of that. Torre had 24/7 news cycle, second-guessing him with sports talk radio and everything. Those guys never had any of that. It was a remarkable accomplishment, what he did.
So, speaking of his boss, you take Billy Martin, you take Reggie Jackson, and you take George Steinbrenner, and you put them in a room. There's 6 too many egos involved in that. Any story about their dynamics, the 3 of them?
Well, Reggie and George were pretty much okay, but if you put Billy in the mix, Billy resented George dictating his lineup to him and even signing Reggie in the first place when he thought he didn't need Reggie Jackson to win. So you had some bad stuff going on there, and then put into the mix Thurman Munson and Reggie's attack on Thurman's leadership before he ever played his first game for the Yankees, the famous straw that stirs the drink.
Sport magazine, I remember that. I think it was Sport or Sports Illustrated. It comes out with this, I'm the guy who stirs the drink, Sport, yeah.
So
Dick Schaap, as a matter of fact.
That
was a great article.
It was on my watch when I was the PR guy, and that came to be known as the Bronx Zoo years, and boy, they were tough.
Right. Oh, you had Nettles, you had characters, you had Gossage. It was just, how did you had to edit things, you had to filter things for the press. What a job. What a job. Was it thankless? Did George appreciate you?
I doubt it. I doubt it. See what happened in that, and this is a more serious conversation, but in the wake of Watergate, which happened, like 73, 74, reporters in other departments at the newspapers were inspired by the investigative work of Woodward and Bernstein at the Washington Post. And that included the sports department, and so the sports department, led by Murray Chass of the New York Times, they were no longer taking our press releases as the day's news. They were going after their own stories, and there couldn't have been a more perfect time for them to come up with this new way of covering the team than when free agency hit and players' rights expanded, and you had these oversized characters on the Yankees who were also winning championships. So it was
right.
made to order for a changing of the guard there.
Let me just skip back a little bit. I want to mention Don Zimmer, one of my favorites of all time, was Torrey's bench coach. I think he helped quite a bit. Am I correct?
Well, they never won a World Series with Torrey after Zimmer left, so read into that what you will. But he was a big addition.
Oh, good. I'm glad you feel that way because I really think that the Zip was a great, and he just passed away a couple of months ago, was a great ambassador of baseball. What can I tell you? He was around. He was a Brooklyn Dodger, and was supposed to have beat out Pee Wee Reese, replaced Pee Wee Reese, but for being seriously beamed and injured early on, and still lasted 10, 15 years in the major leagues, the Mets' original third baseman.
That's
right.
So
rest in peace. Rest in peace. Yeah, well, 1 for 30. One, right.
Sorry.
He was like 1 for 34. You're sorry. I'm a Met fan, but a Yankee worshiper, and I really am. I was a Giant fan, a New York Giant fan. They left, and I, for 4 or 5 years, was like in a pinball machine. You know, I originally rooted for the Braves, and you know, in the World Series, the year, especially the year they left in '57. When the Mets were formed, they had me, they got me, and 4 years later, I came out to California and followed them long distance for the rest of my life. So, but follow them I do, because loyalty is part of it. When you're a New Yorker, it's like no place else in the world where if you're a fan of the Yankees, you hate the Mets. If you're a fan of the Mets, you hate the Yankees. And it used to be the Giants and the Yankees, and it was great growing up, standing on the corner talking ball. What a wonderful city. And you wrote, so we're going to get around to it, you wrote an anthology, basically, of their history. This is way before Babe Ruth even, and after George Steinbrenner and Joe Torre. And it's out in paperback recently, and I thought it'd be a good time to talk about that book a little bit. I want to know a few things. I want to know, and you're the guy that answered Mickey Mantle's fan mail right in the heart of it. I mean, he was like, he was the superstar of all time. There will never be another Mick. And not that Mays wasn't probably a better ball player over the course of a career, given Mantle's injuries and failure to rehab and all that stuff, and maybe not taking good care of himself, this, that, and the other thing. But for somebody to say Mickey Mantle, I mean, I still remember the Teresa Brewer song. I think it was Teresa Brewer, I love Mickey, blah, 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 blah. He was something else, and you got to answer his fan mail.
Yeah, Mickey was right out of Central Casting. You know, if you wanted a base sports hero, he had the looks, he had the name, he had the physique, and he was Joe Hardy. He was Joe Hardy. He was Joe Hardy, and of course, why was he ultimately more famous than Willie Mays, even though Willie was the better ball player? The answer, sometimes people try and see a racial thing in it, but the answer was really that he was in the World Series every year, so he had this national spotlight every October on NBC, which Willie didn't have as often. And
he came up very big in the World Series. He still has that.
He was huge in the World Series, and that handsome face on the cover of Life magazine and everything. It was just, he was made for the television age. He was the first TV star that baseball had.
Was he deeper than portrayed, or was he just a country boy?
He was a country boy, but he, immediately had New York City style teammates who showed him around. Whitey Ford certainly was one. Billy Martin came from an urban environment in Oakland, and they kind of matured Mickey in a hurry.
Right. Was he a good guy at heart?
He was a great guy. You just loved to be in his company. He was just good to people. I remember, I couldn't stop staring at him. I was a fan, and now I was working with him. And I would remember that if a new player joined the team, Mickey would walk across the clubhouse to say, "Hi, I'm Mick." And can you imagine how you
can imagine some kid? You can imagine some kid up just coming up. Unbelievable how that must feel. Yeah, and I think he compensated for what Joe DiMaggio did not show him in transition. Has that been exaggerated, or were they not? Were they closer than?
True. It's true, but it's only been exaggerated in the sense that it makes it like that was Joe, but it was actually a generational thing. That was Joe and all his teammates and their attitude towards rookies who came along to take the jobs of their friends. So It was a generational thing. That was the style back then. But Mick was the other way. Mick was welcoming, and he was, just great to everybody. And, when he would do radio interviews on the road or at Yankee Stadium, they'd give him a gift certificate for being on with them. And he'd give them to me. He would save them up even from the road, and he would give them to me when he got back to New York.
Wow.
So I would get $10 off on Tom McCann's shoes, and it was thanks to Mickey Mantle.
Right. But in those days, that's $40 off today, number one. And inflation gets you every time. Hey, you wrote the book. I got to know, did Leo DeRocher steal Babe Ruth's watch?
Probably. They always thought he did. Babe thought he did.
Okay.
The book, by the way, which you didn't mention the title, is Pinstripe Empire, and as you said, it's just out in softcover. And what it was and is was the first narrative history of the team in over 70 years. Hard to believe that nobody had done it along the way. There have been some beautiful coffee table picture books, but no history of the team until I sort of just came to that realization one day and thought, boy, what a great project that would be. So that was the genesis of that book.
And you naturally had inside sources. You naturally had your own memories and the stories you'd heard. Tell me about a typical old-timers day in the 50s for the Yankees.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I liked them a lot back then because they would have half the players were Yankees and half the players were opponents. There might be a theme, for instance, like the 1941 World Series, and so they'd have all the 41 Dodgers who were still living and all the 41 Yankees.
Right.
I really enjoyed it, and in the days that I helped organize those games, it was just fun to try and make sure you got the exact right uniform that they wore in that year. And I think the fans got a big kick out of seeing the opponents. Today they're all Yankee events. They're all, 60, 75 guests, all wearing the pinstripe uniforms.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe it's just when you get older, the legends grow larger. But as a kid in the 50s, my gosh, you'd see Cy Young and Tris Speaker and Paul Wainer and Pie Traynor and Frankie Frisch and Rogers Hornsby. And today,
it's all in one day. It's like a whole lifetime worth of. I ran into him once, but these are guys you just all in one. Unbelievable how great that had to be for you.
Today you don't have the same magnitude, at least in my mind, because I see the old-timers introduced today, and it's like, this guy just played yesterday. It's not like a big deal. But maybe it's just, as you grow older, the years compress faster, and a guy who played in the 70s, to me, seems like it was just yesterday. But maybe to young fans, it is like seeing Ty Cobb if you see Greg Nettles. I don't know.
Right. Right, and when I think about it, when I was watching baseball in the 50s, Ty Cobbs was like 25 years before, played 25, maybe 30 years before. Now now these guys, to put it into perspective, the guys I watched were like 55, 60 years ago. So we're both getting up there. I mean, and I got you beat, I found out on Wikipedia, in terms of age. So it's been a while. I just want to tell you, and I watched the Yankees in 1951. My grandfather took me to all three stadiums. I was 5.5 years old, and he said, I could remember like yesterday, he says, see center field, that's Joe DiMaggio. Watch him. Just remember that you saw him. And went to the Giants. That is before Willie Mays got called up. Went to the Dodgers. He said, look across the street, Bedford Avenue. That's where your Aunt Sonny lives, in that building over there. At 5.5. So that's how baseball was passed on in my family. Was passed on in my family. How did you come to it in yours? Was your dad or your grandfather or uncles, were they into it, or was it friends on the corner?
It's an interesting question. My father was born in Brooklyn in 1916, but he was not a baseball fan. There just wasn't something he and his friends embraced. But in the mid-'50s, I think he just felt like, I should take my son to a Brooklyn Dodgers game because that's what dads do. So in 55, he took me to Ebbets Field, and it was first game for me and first game for him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And 55, he couldn't have picked a better year for the Dodgers, because after all those years with Newcomb not coming up big, and Newcomb got a bad rap because he got him there. I mean, but it was nice to see the Dodgers win it in 55, and even as a Giant fan, it was nice.
Oh, it made me a Yankees fan, because my first real memory was not the game I went to. I was a little too young to appreciate it all. But when they were dancing in the streets in Brooklyn in 1955, I decided I was going to root for the underdog, the Yankees, and I became a Yankee fan from that event. And so since my whole life has been a mistake. I should have been a Dodgers fan.
But just that you had it in your head that the Yankees, you could say the words, Yankees, underdog. It didn't make sense.
Right.
When it ended, like after Ralph Houck took over and they won once or twice, and it started to really go bad. Ford got old in a hurry. Mann got old in a hurry. Was it shock in Yankeeville? Did they have a feeling this was coming? And how did they handle it?
Nobody saw it coming, and I guess really astute people might have noticed there was not much coming up in the farm system. But the Yankees always seemed to find a way anyway, and they had more money than the other teams, and what they were missing they could go out and buy, as they still do today. But I don't know, it's just CBS bought the team from Topping and Webb. Horace Clark replaced Bobby Richardson at second base, and there was a long dry spell that followed. Not until Steinbrenner bought the team, and then 3 years later, they're back in the World Series. So I don't know if you could fairly blame management during that period between Topping Webb and Steinbrenner, but there was nothing to show for it.
Right. Let me ask you this. Does George Weiss go down as a guy that gets enough credit we hear Branch Rickey this, Branch Rickey that. George Weiss, not to even mention that when he took over the Mets in 62, laid the foundation for them winning in 69 as quickly as they did, both with the people he hired and decisions he made. One of those people was Whitey Herzog. And think about what Weiss did. He was really something else. Any George Weiss stories?
Well, when I wrote Pinstripe Empire, there was a missing piece for me. I wish Weiss had written a memoir that would have been very helpful and insightful. He was not like a glad-hander with the sports writers. He was an aloof figure without a sense of humor, seldom seen smiling. I remember Bobby Richardson is a good friend still, and I called him to ask him if he had any George Weiss stories for me, and he said he never met the man. I was shocked. He said Weiss only handled contracts with the big stars, and everybody else was his assistant, Roy Hamey, and Bobby Richardson never met George Weiss, and maybe that's all you need to know.
That is a great piece of trivia, and it's not trivial. It's a piece of information that I'll think about that puts it all into perspective. Thank you. That's really great. And we wanted to stick to your deadline, your time. I know you're busy. I want to ask you one more question that always sticks in my head. Was Casey going to be fired if one way or the other in 1960 that last game was just incredible with Smith and Mazarowski and all that. Was his fate sealed earlier on, or Houck says that he was gone that Casey was gone either way, but Houck is the guy that benefited, or said he's passed. What say you?
Well, there's no clear answer to that, but the fact was Casey was getting older, and the Yankees had his successor in mind in Ralph Houck, who they thought was just going to be a fabulous manager. And when it became known that Houck was getting feelers from Boston to go up and manage the Red Sox, they felt, we don't want this to happen. We want Houck to stay with us. We want him to be Casey's successor. The fact that Boston was making offers to Houck or discussing a managerial job with him kind of pushed the process a little faster. Now, had Stengel won that seventh game, who knows? But would they have kept Casey and lost Ralph Houck in the process? I don't know. I kind of think they still would have announced Casey's retirement and hoped they could get away with his retiring.
Okay. One more. You want to talk about Ellie Howard real briefly?
Yeah, Ellie was a wonderful guy, a good friend, should have had his shot at being manager. If not when Houck left, then after Dick Williams was vetoed as Yankee manager. That's a complicated story. But then they picked Bill Verdon, and that was really Ellie's moment. He should have been given the team at that point, which would have made him the first African-American manager in baseball. Right. He was the first African-American coach in the American League, and of course the first player on the Yankees. But he deserved that other managing job, and I feel badly to this day that he didn't have that shot. And he died young. He died in 1980, which was a great loss. But he was a terrific guy.
All right. Hey, as are you, Marty. Thank you. This was tremendous for me because, I go back. And anybody who goes back to New York is going to love this interview. Thank you. Go out, buy the book. You'll love it. And I want to end the segment as I end most of my segments, just by saying, quite simply, to keep your humor dry and your dreams wet, and keep on keeping on. Thanks again, Marty. Take care, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Good night.
Good night.
You are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man, Alameda, California, and my guest just joined me, so it is working. We are on the air. Fred L.
On the air, my friend?
Lazarus. Yeah.
Hello, Ralph.
How you doing?
I'm a box of fluffy ducks, like I always am. I'm doing great, man. Each morning I wake
up. I was
up.
saying to you off the air a little while ago that I just love hearing your cheery voice, because whatever happens in life, you have a way of looking at the bright side that is like no other. And delighted you're my buddy, and I'm delighted you keep coming on and just.
Dan, that makes me feel good to have you say that. I don't have any other choice, man. I had death knocking at my door, ex-old ladies who hate me, landlords who I owed rent to. Oh, it's all good, man. It's all good.
You know, I always had this expression, they could kill you, but they can't eat you.
That's right, and you can't get blood out of a turnip, so you know.
Well, and then I ended up reading about the Donner parties, so that was a bunch of shit.
Yeah, that didn't work out the way they wanted it to, did it?
No,
they
it wasn't
didn't
like
gold or green grass on the other side of that hill, did they?
hors d'oeuvres for everyone. My question, Fred, is I want you to be the guy to announce it, partially perhaps because of some of the fun that we've had on the airways of Comfortably Zoned, and we always seem to be when we're together on the air. You're going to be a podcast host.
Yes,
and
I am.
I want you to tell me all about
company,
it.
But we'll see how long they have me and how long I have them. It's going to be called the Derfcast, DERFCAST, the Derfcast, and it's going to be interesting, Ralph. I mean, I hope I could do half as good as you. But it's going to be fun. I have a lot of people lined up. Comics from the old Zoo days, a Hollywood agent to my hero, Roddy Piper.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to get him on, but it's going to be hard. I have to go through the chain of commands, I've been told. And I even have his daughter coming on within a month if I'm successful, and so we'll go, one show at a time, and I hope to have Mr. Tyko from Parts Unknown on, but we're working on that.
Okay, well, you'd have to get special clearance from the folks above at FCC Free Radio, which for me turned out.
Since I've talked to you last, I've been told I could have anybody from God and the devil to Sarah Palin to anybody on, basically, because I've paid. I've paid my money,
that would include me, God to the devil, and a little touch of Sarah Palin. I don't know.
Maybe from the front up, but anything else is brain dead in that poor woman. I feel so sorry for her, but I wish I had her money.
Well, I feel sorry for the people that were brain dead enough to vote for her, and the people to keep her in. And that.
Have you heard her latest endeavor, Ralph? Have you been paying attention to the news? Or she has started her own pay-per-view channel.
Oh, really?
I swear to God, yeah. For $9 a month, you could talk to her and listen to her once a day. We won't waste any time. I mean, I won't waste any of your valuable time talking about it, but she's trying to keep relevant, I guess I could say.
Well, you are an inspiration, because now I have to go out and find some valuable time for you not to waste, which is somewhat of a challenge for those who know. For those who know me best, it's going to be a challenge, but like I say, with your inspiration and with God's will.
Ralph, I don't think there's not too much on this earth you can't survive and get through, just like me,
Absolutely. And you're doing it, and that's what the really important thing. So my only advice to you is I will give you the advice that John Miller of FCC Free Radio gave me at one time. If you're going to do a show, and it happens to be a predominantly a talk show that week, play 10 minutes of music for every 20 minutes of talk that you do, And if it's a music show, talk for 10 minutes for every 20 minutes of music that you do.
Gotcha.
So that, and
that's some advice.
Yeah, that's some sound advice from somebody who has a wealth of experience and is a man that can be learned from. And he and I never hit it off. We never saw eye to eye. We had a way of getting under each other's hide. And doesn't mean that we couldn't glean information from each other. And I don't know if he'll remember to mention that to you. Play your favorite music, play the things that you like, talk to the people that you like about subjects that you're interested in and want to learn about, and you'll be terrific because you're likable. You're a likable guy, and you got things going.
You know, like I've told every woman I've ever been with, flattery and compliments will get you everywhere.
Okay.
Or anywhere.
Well, I told women that I've been with, if you just flatter Fred, you're better off. Don't look for ways to flatter me. Just look Fred up in San Francisco. He's a flatterable guy.
That's great. I love you for that. So, well, you know, my format, I mean, a lot of people have asked, and I've told them all the same thing. It's going to be a combination, kind of like yours. Because, like, from one week to the other, you have different subjects, and I'll have different subjects, like, you know, baseball, sports, politics. Professional wrestling is going to play a big part at some point in time. And comedy, you know, the old days, old school. You know, the people that I saw at the old Waldorf that are still swinging a microphone, as they say, and, you know, Greg Proops, Durst, you know, people that I've seen just develop into who they are now that I've kept contact with, and, oh, God, people that aren't in the business that much anymore that I've kept in contact with, Marty Maceda, names that you're very familiar with and probably have had on your podcast also, and but basically,
I've had a few, and I'm going to continue to have the ones that I like. And fortunately, growing up in the comedy world in the 80s, the minds to choose from, to befriend, to hang with, to be with between shows, it was just great days.
Oh, you were blessed. I mean, you were blessed. I was sort of in the business then. I was doing the door at comedy clubs. Well, my thing was playing softball during the day and during the night. But, I mean, you were around, what Steve Pearl, A. Whitney Brown, John Means, Dr. Gonzo, for those who don't know, Proops, just so many great.
Yeah, we had guys coming up. We had people that had established themselves when I was coming up at roughly the same time as Margaret Cho was coming up. We played the Rose and Thistle together, and
really
a number of places. Oh yeah, as a matter of fact.
So Ralph,
my son,
give me a timeline here. Was she working at? Wasn't she working at one of the first sex shops in the city? Not paid for sex,
I'm totally asexual. I can't even talk about sex without breaking out.
Well, she worked at, oh, God, I forgot the name, but she would go from work and hit every single comedy club in town to do open mics, and my respect to Margaret Cho is up there with anybody else. That woman...
Her folks, she's a very cultured woman. Her folks owned a bookstore in San Francisco.
That I knew, right?
And she's a rebel, and she appealed to the Asian community in San Francisco like no one else had.
Oh, she's amazing. She's putting out musical videos now, and she's also in Weird Al Yankovic's new album, Take Up on the song Happy. It's called Tacky, and she's amazing in it. It's just a little dance part that she does. She's with Jack Black and a couple other stars. Yeah, look it up on the net. He released the song. It's out there free. It's called Tacky, and she's in it. And I mean, I think I told you before at another show when I was booking the zoo and managing it, she'd call every night, very polite, and say, Fred, can you put me on 6th, 7th, or 8th? And this went on for about a week, right? And finally she called, and I was breaking up with my girlfriend at the time. I was a little snappy with her. I said, Margaret, from now on, book yourself. You are on 6th, 7th, or 8th at the zoo. Sunday through Thursday, show up, and I'll put you on whenever you show up. And I left it at that. And she just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was a good thing that she got famous because it brought a lot of attention to San Francisco comedy scene. Along with Schneider and, of course, Robin. And, it was always good
Lank
when the San
Francisco Earl,
Francisco
she was friendly with Lank and Earl and some of the folks that
weren't they brilliant? I mean,
they still are. They still are.
Oh, my God. They'd show up and you'd wonder, what are they going to do next? And they'd try new stuff, but then the comics would be in the back of the club, and correct me if I'm wrong, we'd yell at them, do this bit, do that bit,
Right. Right, and you could watch it 2 or 3, 5 times, and it's still funny.
Oh.
And, all right, so, Jew boy, you got to give me, I had the segment.
Gotcha.
I have Jewish guys on. My segment is 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Whenever I have a Jewish guy on with me, and we're having a lot of backlash, anti-Semitic backlash in the world because of the way things are being handled. And as a Facebooker and as a podcaster, I'm always right in the middle of shit like that because I'm a Zionist from the old days. Growing up in the 50s, as kids, we would collect money to plant trees in Israel, and I know the land that the Jews were given was wasteland.
Oil.
And I know they made it into literally the land of milk and honey.
Yes.
And the way things are, they're getting a lot of backlash. They put off retaliating for constant bombings into their country for like 9 years. They did not retaliate. And there wasn't a day that I got up and I said, well, did Israel level Iran today? Did Israel level Syria today? I mean, is it all, when are they going to come back? And now they're coming back and they're saying, hey, don't fuck with us. And there's more,
and of course they're catching crap from the media, and then, I have a great opinion when you're ready for it. I mean, and you're going to love it because I'm in total agreement with you. Well, I equate it to the crap that Obama's having to deal with. It's like, damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, and it's the same thing with Israel. And I think it's the same part of the media and the same type of people that are down on Obama that are down in Israel because they just don't pay attention to facts. I mean, Obama was left so much crap to fix and deal with Bush, and Israel for 9 years has been having a rocket each day somewhere in her territory. And thank God they're the type of the rockets, to kind of give a side note, that aren't guided. They just launch them, and they're like the old bottle rockets we had when we were kids. You never know where they go. Well, thank God these rockets are kind of like the same technology. But finally, she got tired of it when she caught wind of the tunnels and everything, and now she's fighting back. And the media is so down on her. What the hell with them? I mean, she has a right to defend herself. And if Hamas wants to hide
she does indeed, but let's just face it, the right-wing clerics on both sides with their eye for an eye mentality can extend this thing another 30 generations.
Oh, my God,
and the influence that they have over people who are secular. I can't understand how a basic Tea Party runs Israel just as they try to influence what's going on here, and is what it is.
There are similarities, is what I'm trying to say, and it's like, if Hamas wants to hide among civilians, well, Israel has to do what they have to do. I'm sorry. Even though those civilians have no choice, the world should realize that. Say, hey, why is Hamas allowed to launch rocket after rocket after rocket? And finally, Israel gets tired of it and retaliates. These assholes hide in churches and schools and hospitals, not churches, anyway, they hide where they shouldn't be hiding. And when Israel targets them, they're the bad boys. It's just ridiculous. If I was old enough, if I was qualified and young enough, I would go and fight myself. I mean, my family got wiped out in the Holocaust on my dad's side. and
mine too, as a matter of fact.
16 members got gassed, killed. So you know where I'm coming from on that. Absolutely. And my grandmother was a patriot. She, too long of a story for another time, but basically she killed a lot of Nazis in her life in the 4 years she was in the underground. So I'm entitled to say this, I mean, enough is enough.
Very nice stories. Give me a Bubba Meister, which is a grandma story from. Oh my God! That you grew up here.
I would.
Tell me
it's
one.
Okay. Well, she was 4'11", built like two Dolly Partons, so she attracted a lot of guys. And I think I might be wrong with the years, but in 38 or 39, my grandfather was taken and put in a camp, which turned into a death camp, and he was gassed. He was killed. And my grandmother found out about it and then sent my dad to Sweden on one of the trains. I forgot. It's a real famous train where they sent children to Sweden. He was on, like, the first 10 of them. He was on one of them. So they didn't see each other through the whole war until 1946 when they got reunited. But anyway, my grandmother joined the underground, and what she would do would lure German officers, only officers, not soldiers, into a hotel or a restaurant, and then the underground would follow them and waylay the officer and kill him. And my grandmother went to different places all around wherever the underground was. She didn't stay at any one place too long because, 4'11" with huge tits sticks out really, really easy, And
I would say.
Basically, the story I was told. Oh, go ahead.
I'm getting hot over your grandmother now, and this is not fair to an old man.
She was a good-looking woman, man.
And you remember her as being younger than I am? You remember her as being younger than I am now when you're saying this?
Well, I mean, she was vivacious. She was very vain with her looks. She actually was really good friends with Zsa Zsa Gabor's mother. Honest, and she.
Zsa Zsa Gabor's mother. Her name was
Zsa Zsa Gabor's mother, the Gabor sister's mother.
Magda Gabor.
Yeah. Zsa Zsa and Eva, and I forgot the other third sister. But she was really good friends with their mother.
Zeppo. I think the other one was Zeppo, if I'm not mistaken. I get confused.
That's the Marx Brothers.
Oh, Jesus Christ. You got to help me, Brett. That's why I'm alone out here.
But make a long story short, the one story I heard over and over again from my dad, from my mother, and from my grandmother, there weren't too many stories, but the one I heard the most was she rode a bicycle to this bridge, and in her own words, I let the soldiers look at me and hug me while the underground guys snuck past them and planted a bomb on the bridge and blew the bridge up when there was a train going over. And that's the one story I heard over and over and over again growing up, so there has to be some validity to it.
Right.
I haven't bothered to look anything up in the Holocaust Museum, although my grandmother's papers and Jewish star from one of her coats is there, and her ID is there. I should go look at it. But yeah, so she was a patriot.
And what few people know is that Bill Withers sung the original song "Grandma's Tits" in honor of your grandmother. It wasn't Grandma's hands. In the early
Bill
days,
Withers, Lean on Me.
He was right. Lean on Me, and Bill Withers was quite a Zionist in his own way.
Really? Well, there's still a little bit left of the story, just a little bit,
okay.
And it's very interesting, if I have to say so. My grandmother, they met back in 1946, and they stayed in Europe. Her two sisters and my dad and her. That's all that was left of the family, and they had a bank before the war got taken in 1937 when the uprising came. But to make a long story short, they all came to New York in 1950, Ellis Island, the whole bit. But every 3 years, my grandmother would fly back or take a ship back to Europe and come back and have money. Like either jewels, gold coins, or cash. And then she'd trade that, she'd cash it in. And my grandmother died a fairly rich woman. She had 2 houses in Marinwood. They eventually came to the West Coast. She settled in Marin, and she traveled all over the world. Anyway, what finally came out, my dad told me a couple things on his deathbed and didn't ever talk about it until he was dying, and it was my grandmother's wish for me not to know anything until my dad was on his deathbed. And that's what he told me, that of the of the officers that she helped kill, she'd get like a gold tooth or a ring or something from each one that was killed, and she'd take it and go bury it somewhere in Europe, supposedly. So she had a stash that she would visit up until right before I was born in 1959. She quit going to Europe. So she made 4 or 5 trips from 51 to 59 and would go get her booty and cash it in.
Oh.
And that's, isn't that something?
What a terrific story.
And, you know, I've done a little bit of research
in light of all the money that was lost that went to banks in Sweden and never returned, and the artwork, and Jews had to beg for some of their stuff and reprisals.
Right.
It's nice to know somebody got over. And
yes, you know, and my dad blew it all. Everything he inherited, he blew it all.
That's the way it should be. What are you going to do?
Yeah, it was her son. You know, it was her son, and I never held it against my father. The last 3 years of his life, I basically supported him up to a point. And I have like one ring of my grandmother's and a purse. But, I mean, it's amazing, Ralph, that I asked around, and long story short, that was not uncommon for Holocaust survivors and people in the underground at that point in time of the war to bury things like that because they were so afraid of showing wealth and having any money during the wartime, you know, that if they got caught or captured, the Nazis would get it again. So they buried it and would go for it, go retrieve it after the war.
What was your grandmother's name?
Hilda Lazarus.
Hilda Lazarus. Let's give her credit on the air. And she has a grandson who has that same spirit of survival, of not taking shit from anybody.
No, I haven't. You know what? It hasn't helped me much in my life, but I wake up with what little bit of pride I have every morning.
Well, you know, when you say it hasn't helped you, it's very cathartic to get out what you think and to live the life that you want to live. It's not easy. There's a terrific song Rick Nelson sung about going back to the garden party.
Garden party, my first 45. My very first.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I went to a garden party.
In Israel, it was 44.95. It was marked down. But,
so, Ralph, real quick, give me a quick history, if you would, of your family, just real quick. I mean, as quick as you can, just so we.
We're talking before prison or after prison.
No, during the Holocaust, if you don't mind.
Well, my father.
After prison.
I just need clarity, Fred. That's all I need.
That's quite all right. You got all the clarity from me you want. You just talk slow and put it out there, and I'll be quiet, man.
All right. Well, geez, that's very interesting. But my father, who was 9 or 11 years older than my mother, who was born in 1920, and he escaped Poland, where he and his brothers and sisters grew up, and left his mother behind, and she was taken to one of the concentration camps. And he went to Antwerp. He was taught the diamond trade, originally as a cutter. He cut diamonds, and unpolished, they called them. And he learned a trade in his very, very early years, and fortunately he was able to escape Poland to get to Antwerp and Belgium and that part. And then here came the Nazis, so he gets on a boat, and he's trying to get to the United States, and he's waylaid, has to go to Cuba, went through Cuba, emigrated to the United States, and became an American citizen by serving time during the war as a stateside soldier. He enlisted in return for his citizenship when the war was over, and he had come to America like his uncles, all in the diamond business, basically just smuggling a bunch of diamonds in from Europe, and they survived on that. And so he came here pretty well set up from that standpoint. But the toll that the Holocaust took on him was the loss of his mother, the loss of a brother who I was named after, and his brother's wife and kids were killed in the camps, and he carried that with him. He wasn't the life of anybody's party. He wasn't a gregarious fellow, and he had a dry sense of humor. But there was a certain underlining sorrow that was with him, and couldn't be denied, and he got to pass it on to the family in making us both agnostics and pragmatists, and wouldn't worship a God that would allow this to happen, let alone he knew from science books.
That's a carbon copy of my father, Ralph. Carbon copy. Keep going, but I just wanted to tell you this. I had to interrupt you. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it probably, anybody who lives through something like that has a hard time spiritually, but he was the most cultured of all Jews that imaginable. He didn't follow any of the practices, had a stick up his ass, if you will, about organized religion from a Jewish standpoint, where he would look and say, look at these people, they have to line up to pay money on the high holy days to sit there, and which is unfair, because that's like the rich get to go to heaven and the poor don't. And so he thought all organized religion was hypocritical, and that God didn't require a middleman or a woman, for that matter, to go between. And so I got a lot of great things from him that can't be denied, and I got other things from him that I resent. I mean, he was me growing up. I wanted to be a baseball announcer, and I was discouraged by his practicality. Quote, do you know how many people want to be baseball announcers? What do you think
Right,
the
we
chances
talked about
are?
that once. Yes.
Yeah.
It's so much like my father. It's amazing, the similarities. And, I mean, I've always thought that Holocaust survivors would go one of three ways. They'd either be like an introvert, they'd be an asshole, or they'd be the most giving person around. And it sounds like, your father and my father stayed the same, because I got talked out of anything I ever wanted to do growing up.
Well, it was, first of all, it was a time in the 50s where there was no fallback. When you fail, you're selling pencils on the street, that kind of thing. There was no welfare, no unemployment, and he was a practical kind of guy, but he managed to kill a dream, or at least put it off for a while. And it's something that I learned when I had my son Philip. I just tried never to discourage him from whatever it is he wanted. Rather than say you can't do it, I'd ask him the rhetorical question: okay, what's it going to take? What do you, what's
exactly
your plan?
Like my good friend Steve Lassoff did that with his son. And I am in awe.
Steve's been on the show a number of times.
So much respect as a father. we've had our little verbal battles of little crap between us. But everything aside, it sounds like you and him are on the same page as a father. He let his son develop and encouraged whatever it was. And in his case, it was computers. And now Jonathan's making almost $200K a year, goes all over the world. He's only 24, and I give Steve total credit for that. And it sounds like you've done the same thing with your son. And I'm jealous. I mean, I wish my father would have done that. It's long over. I'm jealous in a good way, because I'm a survivor. I know where my next meal is going to come from. I have a roof over my head.
Well,
really nice to hear that you did that with your son.
As adults, we can look back and say, well, of course he did something like this. These were the reasons, and that was the reason for this, and this was the reason for that. As a kid, you can't break that down. You have to go with the feelings. You have to go with what you don't understand. I mean,
that's great.
Right.
Randy Hauser's another father. We don't see eye to eye lately, but Randy is a great father to his kids and letting them do what they want to do with their lives. And it's just great, I mean, compared to how I had to grow up and stuff. I mean, look, I don't need any pity from anybody. It is what it is. I was never beat. My father never molested me. I had food every night, roof over my head, clothes on my back.
Right, and believe me, that is to be commended. His skills in doing that, and his ability to do that, as with my dad.
You let's hit on something else that's very near and dear to me. People, I can't say today's generation, but I'm in the service industry, and I see a lot of spoiled rich kids, and it just really pains me when they never sit back and get respect for what their parents do to put those Mercedes on the Mercedes car seats on their ass, the iPhones and all of that, and top of the line this and top of the line that, no matter what.
Sometimes for that is a removed parent who's off making all the money to be able to do that, and you lose on the other end. You lose in intimacy. My father traveled back and forth when I was growing up at a very young age. He'd go back to England for months and months at a time.
Really?
Buy diamonds and bring them back.
That must have been hard for you.
And it was hard as a kid. Now I realize that with that came the money to send kids to camp, to live an upper middle class existence, to, like you say, never miss a meal on the table, and to be steady Eddie. And you just you take the good with the bad. Right.
Right. It sounds like your dad had a great, fantastic work ethic, even though it was instilled in him the wrong way, like my father's was because of the Holocaust. But it's there. The survival instincts were there. I mean, till the day my dad died, he had that work ethic, And although he wasn't making much money at the end, he was still trying, man.
My father had this expression. He said, I cried because I had no shoes, and then I saw a man with no feet, and I said, you don't happen to have an extra pair of shoes you wouldn't be using. No, he didn't really say that. That was...
he lived by it, and he made you think of it, so that's just as good.
Yes.
Yeah, Holocaust, we're children of survivors of the Holocaust, and that we should both be commended for that. People don't realize.
And you should be you should be commended for your stick-to-itiveness and the stuff all the stuff that's good within you that's going to show up on your show. And I'm glad I got to announce. I'm glad we got to announce it on my podcast. And when do you start?
Well, I go for my first training this Thursday with Danny Douche on his. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. God, I'm sorry.
I think it's Dan Decci.
Danny Decci. I am so sorry. Boy, I just put my foot in my mouth. Danny is a sweetheart.
No,
Danny's a lot like you, just a sweet, sweet, nice guy. And he's
a sweet, on his own, he's a sweet, sweet, nice guy. And if you can find people like Paul Brumbaugh over there and Danny who can be a wedge between you and the powers that be when they act out.
I have to say, you do have a point. John's a hard guy, but you know what? I'm going to give it my best. And I've learned from you the 3 times I've been on your show.
Right.
It's going to be fun. And my first show is probably going to be 2 weeks from this Thursday. I have 2 training sessions with Danny. And
that's terrific.
I really have to say something good about Danny. From what I've met him in the last year, and I think you'll appreciate this, he gives other comics shots. He books rooms. He has a couple rooms that he runs. And no matter how small, no matter what, he's there for the new comics and any comic for that matter. And my hat goes off to him because I believe it or not.
I've never heard anybody say a negative word about Danny, and I've never heard Danny say a negative word about any human being. Comic, booker, producer, this, that, and the other thing.
It's a disappearing person that's like that for the comics. I mean, as much as Alex Bennett and I never saw eye to eye that much, I've mellowed out, he's mellowed out. He was there for the comics. It's at different points in times, and that was good. He gave him a venue. Danny does it every week. I mean, he has a room next door to the Holy City Zoo or whatever it's called, the Last Day Saloon, whatever it's called now. Sorry for not knowing the names. I'm old. But he's there every week, every Tuesday. And his beautiful co-host, Rebecca Ward, is also there.
I was just going to say, don't forget Rebecca. She adds.
She's a great, such a sweetie.
Yeah, she really is, and she's been on my show a number of times.
She has been there for me from the word go with my predicament, and I don't know where I'd be without her. And her and Danny are so good together on the air. They're so cute. I mean, they have their little routines, and I just sit back and cover the microphone because I don't want the audience to hear me laughing or making some cute remark. But they really like each other on the air on their show, on his show, and I'm really looking forward to sitting in on it. But listen, before the segment ends, I wanted to just get a little info on how long have you been doing your show? It's one thing I haven't asked you.
It's about coming up in my 3rd year, but I had a tumultuous time at FCC, Not So Free Radio.
That's what I heard.
And so I left a couple of different times and came back, and now I'm doing it through Spreaker, and I archive all the shows on YouTube. A lot of them
I'm going to do the same if they let me. I don't know. I signed a contract, so
I don't think they'll let you archive off, but do, just in case you leave, they will archive the show while you're there. That will cease to be in existence when you leave. So each week, download your show, and when and if you leave, you'll always have a place to archive it wherever. And YouTube is free. And,
someone already showed me how to do that. And I have a whiz kid cousin up in Eugene, Oregon, who's going to call in every once in a while. He's helping me with co-hosting occasionally. I'm going to have a bunch of co-hosts. The powers to be weren't really up 100% on that at first, but I explained to him the format. Then he was okay with it. At first he just wanted one solid co-host, but I said, I have too many. I have too many. I'm going to be a nice guy, and I'm going to feel it out, and I signed a contract, I'll be honest with you, until the end of the middle of October. So we'll see how it goes. But, Ralph, I'm going to love it. And we could discuss something else on the side off the air about, doing another gig or something. I really want to see you in person, though, at some point in time. I mean, I feel bad for the past because I definitely remember you at the zoo. I remember you as very well-mannered. You never went against the game plan that Bob Fisher or myself or Janet laid out. You were always on time. You never overdid your set. I'm really looking forward to meeting you for the second time, man. And
I'm most proud I never pulled the weapon on stage, which was and that took some. They had to talk me down from a number of different ledges at one time or another.
They ever have to talk you down from the crow's nest at the zoo? You remember when Michael Meehan jumped off that? That had to be one of the funniest nights. But I have talked to Mike, and you are definitely in the part 2 of Hey Monster, Hands Off My City. So I took care of that for you. So he's writing it now as we speak. Uh-oh. You still there, Ralph? Uh-oh. Oh, dear. Hello?